Can you hear me now?
Yes, Dan.
All right, okay. Hello, everyone. Sorry. Who's all here? I see. Everybody on? Everybody here, Kathy? Kathleen?
Yes, at this point in time, you have 17 folks on the call this evening, commission members along with various members of the public and the applicant. Actually, the applicant, it doesn't appear to be any private members. There's just one name I do not recognize, Oliver
Okay.
Gray. Perhaps he is with the applicant, I'm not certain. I'm going to admit Colin Dobbin, another commission member, is joining us now. So if we could just hold on for
Sure.
a few seconds more, that would be great.
All right, we're ready to start.
I think
Welcome,
you're
everyone.
ready. You're ready now.
Technical problems tonight getting in.
Hi, Colin. You're all set. We're just getting going now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the New Canaan Inland Wetlands Commission of Monday, March 15th. Will the secretary take the roll, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stepanek,
Here.
Ms. Jameson, present. Mr. Dobbin,
Present.
Ms. Kirby,
Here.
Mr. Perkins,
Here.
Ms. Bernali,
Absent, I guess.
absent. Ms. Woike,
Here.
Mr. Sillo.
Here.
And, I'm
Here.
sorry.
I'm here.
Okay, very good. And Ms. Ross.
Here.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, let's, I guess Beth is not going to join us. So Priscilla, will you take her role as a regular tonight? Substitute for Beth, Priscilla?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, good. All right, you all have the copy of the agenda. Any problems, deletions, any questions? If not, can I hear a motion?
I'll move.
To approve.
Second.
And who moved? Colin, did you?
I think I beat Peggy to it, yes.
Okay, and Peggy, you're gonna second it. Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 21st, which is almost 3 months ago. You get a copy of that? Any comments, deletions? If not, can I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Okay.
I'm sorry, one point of order, Dan. I'm sorry, Kathleen Holland here. Who was the second on the minute?
I was.
So Priscilla, I think this evening you may not be seated. I believe Penny was seated. Did I get that wrong?
No, Priscilla was.
I'm sorry, Priscilla is seated. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I even wrote that down. Perfect. We're good. Thank you. Keep going. Sorry.
All right, let's open the regular meeting. Is Keith, are you here? Keith Simpson? Oh, there's Keith. I got you, Keith. I see you. Okay,
I'm here, Dan.
good. So let's open up the regular meeting now. The application number 181938, Karen J. and Todd Holson of 386 Wheat Street. Agent Keith E. Simpson, Simpson Associates. Take it away, Keith.
All right, and this is Todd. If I could just open it up, if I may, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Who's speaking?
This is Todd Holson.
Okay, all right, Todd, I see you. Yep.
Great. So I'm Todd Holson and I live at 386 Wheat Street with my wife, Karen. Keith Simpson is here to present this modification. But before we start, I wanted to thank each of you on the commission for taking the time to meet with us and review our application. As you will hear, we are in front of you tonight because the project got off track at its completion, and I want to apologize for that. We have assembled a very experienced team for this project. I've worked with each of these individuals for many years and believe that their work has been very well done and to a very high standard. Clearly, some mistakes were made at the end of the project, and ultimately, as the homeowner, I take full responsibility. We've been working hard to get back on track, and Keith is here, and will present a plan which hopefully addresses any issues or concerns. So with that, I turn it over to Keith.
Thank you, Todd. Keith?
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the commission and Mr. Holson for that introduction. Around the end of last year, Kathleen Holland and I were observing the state of the site, you might say, and there were some questions arose as to whether there was any difference between what was approved in the second of the two approvals which the commission gave us and what had ended up being constructed. So she said, I think it would be really best if you could clarify that for the commission. And then if there was a necessity for requesting any modification to the permit which had been issued, then we should do that. So I wrote up this report, which I have for you all, because I thought that it's, rather than trying to go through all the events that happened over the last year, there was a year of construction last year, really, practically. I felt this would describe the whole thing from beginning to end. So just to sort of summarize that, back in September of 2019, you gave us permission to build a 1.2 acre pond, which was about 50% of the wetland on the property. We felt that was an appropriate balance, but it was a very big project. And it was also, would have caused a very large amount of disturbance on the property. You approved it and we appreciate that. And we understand that we could have done that. But in the interest of moving along more quickly and in a more manageable way, and because the spring was going to be coming around, we actually came back in again and applied to you, saying that we actually only wanted to do about a quarter of that work to begin with. We probably do this in 2 phases. So we'd like to start out with about a quarter of that work. So you did review that, considered it a modified application, you approved it, and we set out to do that work. Mr. Holson has known Mr. Nazaro for a long time. He's a very experienced pond contractor. So he set about building the foundations for a bridge, which we built across the river back in January. In fact, we started really work on this project back in January of last year. So anyway, there was a lot going on the property. I was charged by the commission to check it out on a regular basis, which I did with Bill Pollock from my office, who was here also tonight. And we tended to go out once a week, keep an eye out on looking specifically for 2 things, really on behalf of the commission. I felt our charge was to make sure there were no adverse impacts on the wetlands, which would not have been what the commission would normally have expected to see in connection with the pond dredging. That was one important item. And the second was to watch out for any downstream impacts. Dredging a pond is a really tricky operation when you have a major river or stream flowing through it. At any given time, you can have a major storm and you've got water to cope with. And if you're not careful, you're going to have a deterioration in the quality of the water, which is running off the property. I should say right now that, one, I don't think there was any adverse impact on the wetland during the course of the project, but also we monitored very closely the water quality going downstream, and it was extremely clean water. I never saw any siltation in the water. There were times during the construction of the whole operation when the water flow was down to next to nothing because we happened to run into a very dry stretch. Some neighbors downstream wondered why the water had stopped, and it hadn't stopped because of us. It had stopped because of the nature of the summer last summer. So anyway, so we got on with the job. And it was a lot of activity on the property at any given time. The bridge, which I hope some of you have seen, was no minor construction. The abutments were very substantial. And then that when the bridge abutments have been built, that's really about when the dredging of the pond started to occur. And it's all listed time-wise in the report for you. But there was a lot going on, tremendously busy property. So as it progressed, I would see Kathleen from time to time, and she would say she'd also been out there, and we did not have any areas that we were concerned about in the skillfulness of the site operation. In fact, I really thought it was absolutely first rate, as good as any I've experienced on any pond dredging project sort of this magnitude. When it got close to the end, the pond was moving along perfectly satisfactorily. One of the things I would say about ponds is that unlike digging a foundation for a building where you tend to dig it to precise dimensions and exact location, and every foot or two matters. Pond dredging is much more of an art, and you don't know what you're going to find when you dig down. And in this particular case, for example, when we cleared away a lot of the brush around the outside and the edge of the pond, Gene Nazaro discovered that there was, in fact, a very clear delineation of former line of boulders, which had been the edge of the pond. And so he was able to excavate those, reset them. Many of them had settled out of place over the course of time. So you really don't know what you're going to find, and also you don't know what you're going to find in terms of material. Sometimes you run into very clay material, sometimes you run into sand and gravel. So it's something that we're always glad to have somebody doing this kind of work who is done it a long time, is skillful, knows what they're encountering and so on. But it worked very well. There was a point in the excavation of the whole pond operation when the bridge was getting to the stage where we were going to run power from one side of the river to the other. And we had always planned for it to go suspended in conduit underneath the bridge. And then the power company came along and said, we really don't want it done that way. We want to see it taken under the river. So Gene Nazaro and I, we got in touch, and Bill, we got in touch with Kathleen and said, this is a change, and we'd really like to let you know that this request has been made. We don't really see any alternative to doing that. There isn't a route around the river when it goes right through your property. So she asked for detailed information as to how we would do that. We explained it, and we provided some documentation for her file showing what kind of a design detail we would use to be able to drop this conduit underneath the river and then backfill over it, and manage the whole change order, basically, to do it skillfully and successfully. She approved that, which we appreciate. We think it was a very fair request and a fair approval, and it kept us going. And so finally, when we got to the last probably 10% of the projects and so on, when we thought we were about sort of nearing finish, the pond got rounded out at the north end. The south end has really always been the same where the spillway is, and it's been built the way it was designed originally, but the north end got reshaped and rounded out. Usually when we're talking about a pond, we usually give approximation numbers to a quarter of an acre, half an acre, or whatever it is. But we usually expect that to be within 10 or 15% of what the permitted amount was. In this case, it got somewhat larger up in the north end, and there was some overclearing, which we found really sort of after the fact when we came to go out and survey what we got. So that was a change, which Kathleen observed it too, and she said, "I really think I need to know, how that came about." And then I was notified at one point that a dock which was proposed for the pond. Mr. Holson and the contractor said, we actually are wondering whether we can put it on the west side of the pond instead of the east side of the pond. And because of the reduction in the shape of the pond, it felt to me that it was a very fair request, and I did not think, and it was a judgment call on my part. We were about to pour the footings for it. And so I said, I don't think the commission will be concerned whether this dock is on the west side or the east side of the pond, basically. So I sort of authorized that on my own. And then beyond that, there was, I'm trying to think, was there any other real differences from what was proposed? And so I would just say that the original pond was supposed to be 1.2 acres. We came back to you and asked for a pond of about a quarter of that size. It's ended up being about a third of the original request, an original approved permit. I don't think it's a good thing to actually start filling the pond back in again, which would really be a tremendous amount of disturbance. I think that the size of the pond is really appropriate and it's stable now. But in the report, and I would just direct you to the last page or two of the report that I put together, I had 16 conclusions. And 12 of those really related to what had taken place and my professional opinion of the quality of that work. The last 4 were recommending some mitigation measures. So those are really what we're requesting tonight. We are requesting permission to do some additional mitigating planting, which we think is appropriate. Also, the north end of the pond where it got overcleared, I think the contracting team did what often happens when you sort of overexpose some soil. You basically throw down some seed and try to stabilize it as quickly as you can. So they did that. It looked like a bit of lawn because seed comes up, but it's not intended to be lawn. And we have a mitigation planting planned for that area as well. Those plants will be plants which love to live in a river system like this. So we expect them to take off and they would quickly shade out any grass seed which is in that area. So those are the main recommendations that we have. I do know that Kathleen was asking if we could show the commission, maybe graphically in some ways, what the differences were between originally approved, second approval, and ended up getting built. So with your permission, I'd just like to pass it over to Bill now, who, if he has a shared screen from Kathleen, I think he could show you graphically just what the differences have been. But thank you, and I'll be definitely around to answer any questions, when Bill has finished what he is going to show you.
Thank you, Keith. It's Bill Pollack, landscape architect with Keith Simpson's office. Kathleen, if I can share my screen, I will have some graphics.
All righty, let me just look into how to do that.
It looks like it's working on my end, if you all can see it.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay. We're good.
Okay. Thank you. This is the original permitted project back from 2019. It shows a 1.2 acre pond. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I will try to point out things with a mouse cursor.
We can see it, Bill. Yeah, your cursor is showing up.
Thank you. The bridge is basically centrally located on the screen here as a reference point. The bridge is in brown. The river runs through it in blue, and the pond that was originally proposed is shown as well up to the north side there. The modified approval that Keith spoke about basically went to roughly where the dock is shown, as Keith mentioned, about a quarter or so of the pond, and I'll have another graphic to get into that more. The green area represents wooded areas that were to remain or other areas that may have been cleared. But it shows, this plan also shows the extent of disturbance that was proposed at that time. Now this plan, again for reference, the bridge is shown roughly through the middle of the slide here in brown. The blue that you see now is approximately the surface water, including the pond and the river in the area of work. This red dashed line that you can see represents the area that was proposed to be disturbed originally. The blue line where my cursor is up towards the top of the page was the 1.2 acre proposed edge of pond. And then in the center of the graphic here, you'll see another dashed blue line near the dock. That was the proposed modification back from 2020 that was approved at that time, showing that size of the pond roughly. You can see now that it extends further to the north, as Keith explained. This slide is an image of what it looks like today. You can see the dock to the left. The spillway is just off the slide to the left as well, to the bottom. And straight ahead, of course, is the pond. And then you can see the northern edge there just beyond the dock that we are really focusing on. This last slide is a bit of a cleaner version of the proposed mitigation efforts. Again, the blue you can see is the current configuration of the pond. On the northern end there, there is some additional surface water that extends a little bit further where my cursor is. It's very shallow, and that will be taken over by emergent vegetation. We are planting that edge pretty heavily. We are planting that edge where the seed is shown or has come up with shrub plantings and other emergent vegetation that is consistent with the riverine system. And then down both sides of the pond where there was some disturbance by the dock, there was some disturbance with boulder stabilization, we'd like to add some planting. And then south of the bridge, we're also proposing some additional tree and shrub plantings to continue the consistent sort of existing and proposed planting that is further north of the bridge. And just to conclude, as we all noted at the beginning, the whole team is here, and obviously Mr. Holson led off, so he is here as well, and we'd be glad to answer any of your questions.
Bill, this is Dan. Tell us again why you wanted to reduce the size of the pond initially.
Well, we were looking to, we had started the bridge construction, and we were looking to move forward with a smaller section of pond at that time to be able to get the soils that we needed in the areas of work that we were getting started on. And we went back to Mr. Holson. He thought it was a good plan to proceed with that. And so we started that. We went for the modification and proceeded under that, proceeded with that work.
Bill, this is Colin Dobbin. Can you show us on the map where the overclearing that Mr. Simpson referred to took place?
Up towards the northern section of the page here, where there's a lot of basically green showing, that those are proposed plantings. That area right now is seeded to stabilize it, but we know we want to put back shrubs and emerging vegetation on that edge of the pond.
And just so I understand, in the original plan, that would have been part of the pond, right?
And the original plan, yes, the original, the plan, the pond was significantly farther up. That's right.
Okay, but on the second plan, when the pond was shrunken, that would have remained as wetlands, and so you're saying it was disturbed inadvertently, I guess. Is that where maybe I shouldn't characterize it? You should characterize it.
I think that is a fair characterization. It was as the contractor was working on the site there, they started to work on that section of the pond, and more got taken out than really any of us expected. And then when we all noticed that, that's when, as Keith explained, we talked with Kathleen about getting an as-built survey to see what was actually the condition was and what the dimensions of the extent of the excavation was.
And the mitigation planting that was referred to, that's in that area, or is it also on elsewhere where you're showing trees and shrubs being planted?
That's right. We are definitely showing mitigation planting in the area that was over cleared, but then we are showing additional mitigation planting down really both the east and west side of the pond in areas that where the dock was, so there's disturbance there. On the east side where some boulders were reset, there was some disturbance there, so we're showing some planting. And additionally, we are showing plantings to the south of the bridge, areas that weren't necessarily disturbed. Actually, there was one area where my cursor is right now that was disturbed for some temporary stockpiling, so we'd like to plant that. But along the edges of the river, we feel it is appropriate to add some tree and shrub plantings as well.
Thank you.
Bill, this is Peggy Kirby. I have a couple questions. Which contractor did the disturbance? Was it someone dredging the pond or was it somebody else?
Yeah, it was the contracting team that was working on the pond. That's right.
So it was the people that were dredging the pond.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and so why were they clearing that far up for dredging the pond?
Well, I think it's probably best to ask him directly. Mr. Nazaro is here, and he, his equipment was doing the actual excavation, and I think he was using judgment at that time. But I don't want to put words in his mouth. Maybe Gene,
Sure.
you could weigh in and answer on that.
Absolutely. My name is Gene Nazaro. We do the extensive work for Mr. Holson and pond work in New Canaan. When we were excavating this area, I don't know, my cursor, here we go. I do have it. Tremendous. We have two areas of flow coming into the pond. One on the east side, one on the west side over here. And primarily the greatest flow, I should say, came from the west side in here. In this area, this was a lot of, starting from this point all through here, in this general area, there's an extensive amount of sediment in there. And I would say there's at least 4 feet of muck, just organic material that had accumulated in there. Not only did it accumulate here, what happened is the water actually found its way going to the west and to the east, creating this basically a big island, if you will, or moraine of sediment in here. We're digging this area out. Because of the amount of mud that was in here, the embankment, the area started to slide. As we deepen the pond, the original intent of all of this, going back to what Keith and Bill had said, we started out was to generate enough material for the backfill of the head walls, the wing walls, and the approach to the bridge and exiting the bridge. This is actually the greater fill area in here that occurred, where this wing wall is here. We're excavating this area out. This mud began just to start walking, sliding in, if you will. Below that layer of mud, we had approximately, I would say, anywhere from 6 to, I don't know, 14 inches perhaps of gravelly material. We said, great, we can shape this up and leave it where it is. Below that one layer of gravel, a very thin layer of gravel, there was another woody mass of sediment and old debris, sticks and decayed tree matter that was there. We actually have left that in there, trying to shape this to stabilize it to get a 3-to-1, 2-to-1 slope. Typically, when we dredge something out, sides will walk in, much like if you're perhaps at a beach, you're digging down in the sand, you find some water, the sides fall in. Same thing sloughed in here. So in order to accomplish, without having the benefit of hydraulic pressure to hold the soils back, it kept walking. With that being said, this area in here slid. We stopped as much as we could, left this is very shallow in here, the water now, very little bit sits in this area. It looks a little bit greater in the photograph. The actual depth is probably only a couple of feet deep in that area. The job itself, we were very fortunate that all of the sides, east and west side in the south, were very stable with the rock and the tree growth in here. And if you look back at the photograph that Bill had taken today, all the brushy growth that was up in the northern section has remained. When the trees were removed or the brush was removed from this area, it got to be a bit extensive in that. As a company, myself, we did not remove the brush or any of that nature. We took care of building the pond. And that was really kind of what we ran into in that area. Is to
Okay.
today's flow, your greatest flow comes on the eastern side of this pond. And very little comes from the tributary on the west side until you get a big storm event or significant flow. This is more of a, I won't call it intermittent, but it really only sees activity when the water flow from up in this area gets great enough to split and feed the pond in that direction. I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but that's, it was really a field condition what happens, what we found.
Okay,
Was that-
you did in part, but then you said you didn't take out the brush and the other areas. Who took that out?
A contractor for Mr. Holson.
And do you know who that was?
No, I do not.
I might be able to help with that. Can I be heard?
Sure.
Yes, and I have a follow-up question though too. I'm wondering how large is the area there that was disturbed that we're talking about?
Square footage wise, are you speaking of? Or?
Yes, and I'm not just talking about the edge of the water, I'm talking about the area that was pulled up too. About how large is that?
It's about, I would say about a tenth to a fifth of an acre. You know, it's about 1.1 to 0.2 acres. So that's only about 4,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
I've just got a couple of follow-on questions here. So, Mr. Navarro, at what stage were you aware that what you were doing as far as the dredging was concerned actually went well beyond what had been approved in the application? And why didn't you just stop and say, well, look, this isn't working. We need to do something different, and somebody get in touch with the director of Inland Wetlands, Kathleen Holland?
Mm-hmm. Well, we started excavation at this area, working our way back up. This was the last section of it.
Can I just say, when you keep saying this area, and I think you're pointing on your screen, but like I'm not seeing it on my
Oh,
screen.
I'm sorry, is it?
Now I can see it, yeah.
I can
Okay,
point it for you.
sorry about that. We commenced our activity in here, working our way up. As we got into this area, that's when the soils became different. In here, it was really good, hard river bottom. When you had the accumulated sediment up in this area, that's where the difficulty began. And it was just, time was of the essence when you're working with something like this.
Yeah, but you're not, can I come back to my question?
Sure, certainly.
At what point did you become aware that you were going beyond what was permitted, and what was your reaction then?
Well, to be honest with you, I wasn't looking to go beyond what was permitted at all. Those are not my intentions at all. I would say that it was probably the last 2 days of work, trying to stabilize that and get out of the job, be finished with the pond and let it fill. We had a lot of pressure regarding, as Keith said earlier, about stopping flow. We were not stopping any flow coming through there. There was just a lot of issues. It's trying to get it done, be done and be out of it, and let the hydraulic pressure come up and stabilize that slope, and hopefully it would just stay. That was it.
Mr. Nazaro, was there any threat that while your machines were in there that you thought, maybe we should stabilize this area and make it, make it usable for now and then go back to Kathleen? Was it something like you had the machines on the job and you said, hey, let's just kind of get it done and then we'll go to Kathleen later to make it safe? Or was there something that was like a threat to not to you or the homeowner, but just something that was, as a professional, you said, hey, this is what needs to be done?
Really, it was a judgment call. It's certainly not trying to go around Kathleen or the commission. And we do a lot of work in the surrounding towns as well as New Canaan. I like to believe we have a good reputation of doing what we say we're going to do. And field conditions sometimes change on you. Try to stabilize it as quickly as we could with a grade and get out of there without creating.
Yeah, so that's my thing. I mean, stabilization, I mean, I know you guys have a good reputation. I'm not questioning that. What I'm saying is, was it something that, you know, in your professional opinion, was it something that you said, hey, we should stabilize it and see what we can do from here?
Exactly. Really, it was not a point of trying to be in violation. Let's just go for it. It doesn't matter. It does matter to me, you know, how we handle ourselves professionally. And that's what happened. I mean, just being truthful. You know, the field conditions changed. And
Yes, this is,
at that point, we should have been
this-
brought to Kathleen's
Yeah.
attention.
yes, this is George Perkins. It looks like you were working under some pressure there. Is the area now stabilized and will you have any problems like this in the future?
With this pond or any pond?
No, I'm
I'm trying to answer. I mean,
well, my question is the area stabilized now? I think we have some problems with feedback. I'm not sure what's happening on.
no, it's stabilized now. The ground is stabilized. The water pressure holds it back. There is no further problems with it. My
Okay.
estimation, professional
Great,
opinion,
thank you.
it's fine.
Could I turn to Mr. Keating? I want to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Nazaro. And that is, I mean, you had a plan in front of you, you knew what was permitted, and yet you and the contractor went beyond in terms of the clearing. Why weren't you looking at the plan?
This is Sean Keating. I'm from TLC Lawn and Landscaping Service, and I've worked for Mr. and Mrs. Holson for over 20 years. And of course, since they purchased the property on Weed Street, my role has been primarily just to clarify, you know, in the designing and installing of the gardens and assisting in the design and the and construction of the house and the accessory buildings. And currently I supervise maintenance on the property as well as coordination of projects, and I manage all of the farm operations. This property is an active farm. So as Gene said, and I think it happened very, very quickly when he mentioned it, so you might not have caught it, but this extra bit of work on the north end of the dredging really just happened in 2 days. It was the very last part. Gene's excavators worked quite quickly. And when we encountered these conditions, I would meet with Gene fairly regularly for updates. And he, you know, we both talked about the need to stabilize because a serious rain event that could come with this moving soil could wash down into Indian waters. And so it was kind of a time is of the essence type of thing. That is separate to, I think there are 2 points there. One is Gene's efforts to stabilize and make the pond work. And then the second thing is the clearing. And, you know, we have some staff members, you know, who work at the farm. I think they just got, you know, nothing was done with machinery. This is just loppers and pruners and a weed whacker. And they just went a little bit farther. I didn't happen to be there at that moment, and nobody else was who could just say, stop it. They went a little bit farther than they should have. But all of that vegetation that they cut with loppers and so forth, the root systems are still there. I expect it to make a full recovery this year. And I don't see that as being a serious problem in where we exceeded our boundary.
Well, maybe I could just follow up. Firstly, I want to thank Mr. Holson for coming this evening and apologizing and taking responsibility. I think that is just great. And I thank everybody else for being here and talking about this. But, you know, it's a sad story because the circle of trust has been broken. When the commission approves an application, we think about the reputation and the track record of the professionals who are working on it. And we may not say anything explicitly, but that the reputation and track record is important to us, and we trust them to make sure that the job is done properly and that it is actually in accordance with what was approved. And that trust has been broken, and that has consequences. I mean, you're all here this evening having to talk to us about this, but it has consequences for future applications as well, where we may very well not be so trusting. So, I mean, it's good to hear the story. There are two stories here of the over dredging and then the over clearing. But I personally wouldn't want to minimize the consequences of over clearing that area.
No, you're absolutely correct, and I don't mean to minimize it in any shape or form. Mistakes were definitely made in that regard. I don't. Of course, in the scope of the previous application, which would have meant all of that section was underwater anyway, I don't think that there is any lasting damage, and it is our effort, and we're really, put a lot of time. Keith's team, Gene, myself, Mr. Holson. We really want to get back on that circle of trust because it's very important to us. It really is. We're members of the community here, and the Holsons are particularly anxious to, they purchased this property because they're so interested in the land and so interested in conserving the area, not seeing it developed, and that really is of paramount importance.
Sean, hello?
Go ahead.
I think you're calling on me.
Penny, go ahead.
Okay, I just wonder, Sean.
Who's got that feedback?
Well, I don't know. Okay, I just
Try
want
it.
to know from Sean, when you mentioned lopping and pruning and that those plants would grow back, what kind of plants are they?
I think am I muted? No.
No, you're not.
Am I? Can you hear me?
Mr. Keating, yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So the growth that had come in there, this was all, we believe, 100 years or so, originally a pond, because the rock and so forth that Gene discovered in doing this shows that those banks had previously been a pond. So the plantings in the area that have grown in the silt as the pond eventually silted up are just, what has washed down and grown all native plants that have emerged and even started to make a recovery toward the end of the season. It's all kind of just natural vegetation that's come in.
I mean, desirable vegetation or there are all sorts of invasive things around, so you don't know what it was?
Not specifically that particular area. I mean, I think you've been to the site probably, yes? Well,
I went to the first site visit, which was 2 years ago, when the pond really didn't exist back then. So
it was exactly that vegetation that you saw 2 years ago.
Okay.
So Bill or Mr. Simpson, can we scroll back just a minute and just kind of see what the original, I wasn't on the board at the time. What was the original plan for the pond and how extensive was it supposed to be? Is that blue line there that you guys are pointing out?
Yes, where my cursor is now was the modified approval from last year. And the shaded blue is the configuration of
existing
condition current, right?
But that blue line up top is where it was supposed to be?
Correct. That was the original permitted 1.2 acre pond. That's correct.
Okay, so I mean, you guys went for a modification after getting approved for the bigger pond, correct?
Correct.
Smaller pond.
Yeah, that's correct. And then the modified one was around about a quarter of the size of the original, and what ended up being the size of the pond was close to a third of the size of the original.
Yeah. And then someone, whoever it may be, went in there and used weed whackers and loppers to kind of cut out some stuff that Mr. Nazzaro's excavators happened to, you know, when you have machinery, I mean, obviously it got disturbed a little bit, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's what happened, yeah.
That's safe. Yeah, I also would add, I do believe the vegetation that was cut will certainly come back. It's as Sean mentioned, the root systems are intact, and they should come back pretty forcefully.
But nobody has said what the vegetation is.
Well,
So is there a plan, Mr. Simpson? Is there a plan that, do we have like a laid out plan on what that vegetation would be? I mean, is there something that you guys had there proposed before, or you guys documented what was there before that we can say, hey, you know, we're gonna replace what was existing? Because I understand, listen, as you know, Mr. Simpson, I'm in the business, I've done a lot of excavation, and I understand that machines get in the way and you need a little extra room, especially for these big pond dredging, you know, excavators. I just want to see if we're going to do something, which I imagine that you guys would, that would replace anything that was disturbed.
Yes, we do. We do know pretty much what vegetation was there, even though it's now been cut down to only probably a 12 inches or so high. But it was typically winterberry and spice bush and all the ferns and the plants that we usually find occurring in a wetland system. But the planting plan that we have is really pretty extensive, and Bill has that on the plan. And but the result will be a non-invasive plant for sure, but a much richer plant diversity there than was there before. So I think net it will be an improvement, an enhancement to the wetland in that area. That's the purpose of mitigation planting.
And Mr. Simpson, obviously you've been doing this a very long time, but you're confident that those plants will stabilize. And obviously it doesn't seem like you know what it's going to be yet, but I mean, it's going to stabilize the area nicely and make it kind of what it's supposed to be.
Oh yeah, we have it well planted, and the advantage of planting in an area like that is that, you know, there's no need to irrigate anything. Plant material in that kind of a location tends to take off very well on its own.
And even though it's been disturbed, it will take off on its own, you would imagine. Because right now, I mean, I went to the site today, which is stunning. But I mean, I did go on that bridge and I looked over, and it is just, you know, grass. I mean, I'm assuming that it was disturbed. It looked like it was excavated and you know, graded off. I mean, those plants that you'll be planting will take, I would imagine, even though it was probably graded and altered a little bit.
Oh yeah, we're very confident that the planting will thrive in that location.
Okay. Is there any way that you can get us, Mr. Simpson, just like a list of, you know, what you guys are thinking, just so the commission has a little bit better idea on what we're looking at?
Yeah, the planting plan, which you should have received, has all the plants listed out numerically and by species and everything over on the top left-hand corner of the drawing. So it's, you know, we've finished designing it, and that's what we're proposing.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have another question about the pond itself. You mentioned that at the north end, total depth was about 2 feet. So what is the maximum depth, and is there anything alive in there, such as fish or frogs?
Can I suggest that when people aren't talking, that they mute their mics so we don't get the feedback? Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest that. I could trying to jump in. If you are not speaking, please mute your mic.
Okay, but I did ask a question. Did anyone hear it?
Ask it again.
Okay, okay. So when we were discussing the north end of the pond, and it was said that the depth was about 2 feet there, I wonder what the maximum depth is, and whether there's anything alive in there, such as fish or frogs, and if there's a plan to maybe stock it with fish.
This is Gene Nazaro again. The amount of fish and turtle and frog activity that's present there now, it's very robust. The fish have migrated down from the stream, and perhaps from eggs that were laid from waterfowl, bring them in. There's a tremendous amount of fish activity in there. The growth itself at the outlet area in here is really, it's done so well with new growth, just natural growth that occurs within a pond, within the rock, in such. We were talking about earlier about this area. I would say the maximum depth right now, you're probably 6.5 feet in the
Okay,
center.
so we're talking bluegills, creek chub,
Right
bass.
now, I mean, it appears to be, to me, of the size of it, the last time I looked in the before winter, a lot of small trout and whatnot.
With what kind of trout?
Just small. I would anticipate they were small trout. They look like their body types. They're very small fingerlings at the
Yeah.
time, but there was a
Okay.
tremendous amount of fish activity already.
I live on a river myself, on the Silvermine River, and about the only kind of trout that can actually reproduce are brown trout,
Almost.
in a warm river like that. But
Perhaps they are. I did not, harvest any fish that analyze what was in there, but there's a lot of activity. A lot of wildlife has returned.
well, I'll be right over with my fly rod, believe me.
It's barbless though.
Mr. Navarro, how long did it take you to dredge the pond?
Ooh, that's a question and a half right there. I don't know, a month, I'm guessing,
Took you a month?
perhaps.
And did you work on that top part towards the end or in the beginning?
Towards the end, because we're just trying to shape this up into here. What happens is you've got all this hydraulic pressure. It's coming down from this whole upper wetlands in here. And as we all know, gravity doesn't sleep. So the water kept pushing through and pushing through. That's what would cause it to slide. There have been numerous ponds to where you might, as Keith said earlier, you may have gravel, you might have humus. It's all varieties. I'm doing a pond right now, an 8-acre pond, and you start at one end of it, it's glacial till and hard pan. You move up a third of that pond, and now it becomes clay and unstable mud, and then transitions back to glacial till again, or in bank run gravel. It's just stratified drift and where the flow came through the years. What really amazed me on this is when you hit the gravel and that upper end, that you had a very thin layer of gravel and then decayed woody mass below that with additional mud. I had never encountered that in the past. I've never seen that much woody decomposed material in the soil below. Typically you'll have mud, your silt, your stratified drift. And if you get through that clay, or excuse me, the gravel, you might find a layer of clay, which you want to stop so you don't lose your pond. If you go through that clay, typically you're going to find sand. And as soon as you get through the sand, you're going to find bedrock. It's kind of how it works in New England.
So you're telling us, Mr. Navarro, that I believe that's what I'm hearing, is that you had no choice to do what you did.
That's
Because
correct.
you couldn't have brought it in at the 6-acre mark that you were supposed to do. You had to go beyond that to stabilize it. Is that correct?
Yes, just to keep it from moving. It kept sliding in, just sloughing in. I'm trying to get out of this thing and literally take the excavator and round that off, trying to compact that, and water would just keep breaking through. You'll just see areas that hydraulic pressure come through and just boom, it just surfaces right through, pushes its way through. And that just happens. It leaks on all sides. Not so much on the east or west side, but in this particular area in the north, absolutely. That's what was occurring in there.
I guess the problem we have as a commission is that it doesn't sound like you communicated that to anyone. And I'm not sure what we would have done or what Kathleen would have done or anybody would have done. But it's that kind of lack of communication. We would have liked to known,
You
or
know,
I'm sure what was happening,
in hindsight, you're 100% correct. I would never have just like, oh, let's just take this and run with it. No, that's not my intentions ever. And
Yeah.
it happened. And the only other way you could stabilize something like that would be to put like a row of boulders in there and try to hold that pressure of that soil. That would have been a total different avenue of approach. We did the Silver Mine Art Guild being exactly in the New Canaan town line as well, property line. That's what we had to do to stabilize that ground. In here, that would have been a total modification of the plan. That would not be acceptable in my point of view. I would never have done that. So just
Mr. Azaro,
tried to work with the dirt. Yeah.
Zara, one question for you is that I don't know if how, I know you guys have like experienced operators on site and everything. My question was, every excavator, as you know, has an exit strategy, for lack of a better term. Do you have the notes or anything on your exit strategy as you were leaving this site, like with your machine? I mean, I know that you guys were in a certain spot where, again, like we talked about, you guys were, trying to stabilize this dirt. Was there a way that you can describe to us like how you got your machine out of that area?
Sure.
After stabilizing?
Sure. Well, all the machines, they're long reach excavators that have 50 feet of reach. So I can work with fairly and not being so close to your source. The biggest problem is not how much reach you have, is how much you can get the material away from the machines. The machines themselves all worked on crane mats, timber mats that are bolted together. They're 4 by 4 feet wide, 16 feet long, 8 inches thick. And they're bolted together. All machinery, anything that goes into the pond stays above the water in the mud. Never get down into it. I don't know if I had 40 or 50 of the timber mats at that job. Everything was built as a temporary road in and out of there. It's always a strategy. You've got to be out of the mud. You can't be working, bogging down into it.
Just so my question is, so you exited from the grass area that we're talking about now? You exited from that area and went around, or?
We exited from this general area, right? And you can see my arrow, this dark arrow, in this general area. It was kind of the midpoint in the pond that you could work this side and this side, and this area here. Now going back to Keith's point, we got with Eversource, originally we were going to hang all the conduits on the bottom of the bridge. In fact, I had my guys there, the Corps board, met with Eversource, said, no. We need to go underneath it, underneath the river. And in doing so, that plan was modified. Spoke with Kathleen about that. Keith came up with a drawing for that. So this area was addressed first in relationship to the bridge, the conduit, and all that had to happen, working our way back up. And that's how it went about. We don't want to start at this end here, have all your sediment, any flow.
No, completely understood. I just wanted to see what side of the pond you were on with that long reach excavator, which it looks like you were right in front of the dock there.
That's correct.
And then you reach over to where we're talking about area.
We actually walked right inside the pond.
Mm-hmm.
Machine on timber mats.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, this is Angela Jameson again. So we've talked at great length about two of the pieces here, the over dredging and the over clearing. I'd just like to touch on the third element here, which is the fact that the dock ended up the other side of the pond. So my first question, and then I do have another after this, but my first question is, has that caused any additional disturbance to the pond, to the wetland, having it on the west rather than the east side?
No, I think I can answer that. it really hasn't. When I was shown the location where they were thinking about moving it to, I felt that there was really no difference. It was positioned better in the pond than I'd originally got it shown, because actually I was originally showing it in anticipation of a different shaped pond. So the move was really had certainly no adverse effect. So I didn't feel it was really of much consequence, quite honestly.
Okay, so I guess the second point or question is, you know, I think some communication to Kathleen Holland would have been called for when there is a change like this. You know, it may not be a big deal, but I think that as the director of Wetlands needs to hear about it and make that judgment call.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, and the communication issue, I think I certainly do, and I know Bill in my office, but all of us take seriously, and we do have a very trusting and open communication system with Kathleen, which we appreciate, and it works well. And so, to the extent that we didn't communicate at all the different points on this project, I apologize for my role in that. And I think, we appreciate Kathleen's willingness to be responsive to site conditions as they develop, certainly. If you don't have another question, if I could just follow up on the chairman's question. Mr. Chairman, you asked how long did it take, and I just looked up, and the dredging began at the end of June, went through July, and then ended in early August. And then one other observation I'd like to make, if I may, looking at the drawing which we have in front of us, there was, and to Jean Nazar's point, there is a sort of a west stream which flows into the pond, and then there's an east stream which flows into the pond. And those streams have varying degrees of velocity depending upon what the rainfalls are upstream from them. And so looking at that area in the middle, the one that got disturbed, and which now has a fairly large area of very shallow water in it, like 12 inches deep or that kind of thing. That kind of an area from I'd been around a lot of ponds and a lot of wetlands for many, many years. That kind of a wetland system right there is exceptionally valuable and of far greater functionality than either the open water of the pond or the shrubs from behind it. And the reason for that is that very shallow water, 6 inches or 12 inches deep, gets emergent vegetation in it, and that is prime territory for fish breeding, fish spawning. It's very, very, very productive wetland territory, and that tends to get obliterated over time as shrubs get established, and silt reduces the depth of the pond or eliminates the depth of the pond in that kind of location. But what with this new vegetation there and what we're creating there will actually be the most productive portion of the entire river system that's on Mr. Holson's property. So yes, we want to do that right. And yes, it is coming in the form of a mitigation measure, but that actually is, from a wetland ecological standpoint, a very, very highly productive section of the river here, which we will have created, would not have happened had we not dug a pond at all. So if I may, I just want to make that observation, if I may.
Keith, let me ask you this. Are you saying that if you know then, when you suggested or recommended the smaller pond, which you know now, you would have built in the larger pond? Is that not correct?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that I would have built in the larger pond, but I would have built into whatever pond we were doing the kind of a system which we're ending up within the north end of this pond. So it could be if the pond had been half the size that it is now, we could have still had that very productive dynamic wetland area within any of the ponds, but we didn't just create that because we found ourselves with the pond of the size that we've ended up getting. So I really couldn't say that, Mr. Chairman, no, but it is the net result. I think is very, very beneficial to the wetland system on Mr. Holston's property.
I see. Anyone else have any questions about the pond? What about the plantings? Any more questions about the plantings?
Yeah, Dan, this is Colin. I was out there earlier today, and it is a beautiful piece of property. Obviously, we've been out there multiple times over the years, and I'm glad to see from the plants that there's a significant number of trees and shrubs that are going to be added. I guess my question is, didn't the original plans call for plantings? And I assume this is superseding it, but why was it not done until now? It's pretty bare, and given how long the project's been going on, I was just surprised that there wasn't more planted.
I could answer that one. Some planting did go in. It's actually not as visible this time of the year, but we did do a good amount of planting around the bridge, around the abutments, and around the boulder embankments in the areas of the bridge. There was slated to have more planting around the pond, just as you suggested, under the previous application and the previous modification. We held off on it of planting around the pond until we knew what the as-built survey was going to produce. And therefore, this new plan supersedes the previous pond planting with the notion that we did install quite a bit actually around the bridge area.
Okay, thank you.
Kathleen? Kathleen, do you have any comments?
No, just to summarize, I appreciate everyone's efforts providing a detailed explanation of sort of the series of events that led us to tonight. I do not remember who said it, but the project went along literally 90% seamless. Everything was spot on, from the bridge to the pond dredging to the soil and erosion controls. Inspections during COVID were being made by myself and others, and occasionally I would meet up with Gene or his son Ross while they were doing the dredging, and truly everything was going so very well. It was a very, very large, comprehensive project with multiple things going on, as Keith said. And I'm appreciative of the explanation and the issues that Gene Nazaro ran into. I wish I had been knowledgeable of it at the time, but it literally does sound like it happened in a 2-day period of time. And then upon going out for further inspections, things looked off to me. So that's when we reset our gears and took a hard look at the current situation, and I felt the need to bring the commission up to speed tonight. So I do appreciate everyone's efforts on this. I'm always available for communication. I think we all do have very, very good working relationships, and it's a huge depth of knowledge that you have on this team. So at the end of the day, we will have a really terrific project, and it will be corrected hopefully by the modification allowing this to occur tonight. And I think there should be continued oversight by Keith Simpson's office as far as the planting and landscaping, and a final summary landscaping plan upon completion, like we've done with other projects, to assure that the numbers, types, and sizes of plants have been installed and are thriving. So I think that potentially, if you're thinking about a special condition, would be something that you might want to add to the modification. And I don't think I had any other follow-up comments. I think everyone provided as much information as they possibly can, and I appreciate everyone's time tonight.
So we basically are here tonight to approve the the second part of the modification, which is the plantings. Is that right? Is that,
So it would
did
be,
you?
it would be to allow the pond to remain the size that's been dredged, to
Yeah.
allow mitigation plantings to occur in the areas as detailed on L302, and to allow the dock to remain on the west side of the
see.
pond as opposed to the east side. Those are the primary issues that differ from the second modification.
Anyone else have any comments before we go to a vote?
Kathleen, just to confirm, you've looked at the mitigation plantings and you've signed off on it. You believe it's adequate and appropriate for the property. All right.
I have reviewed Keith's report, which was very thorough, and I appreciate the time and effort that went into the plan. I think the plantings and the numbers and types and sizes I truly defer to Keith and his team on what's appropriate for that location. It does seem to be quite sufficient as far as preventing erosion and establishing themselves long-term in that area. So to the extent that I've signed off, yes, I don't see any issues with the application that's been provided. And now it's up to the commission to also find the same conclusion.
Thank you.
Will the plantings be done this summer? Is that what the intention is right now?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would say we would like to get on with the planting promptly this spring. And the earlier we get planting in the ground, the higher the rate of survival it has. So there's a certain amount of lead time of a few weeks, but not very long. So I think the sooner we could do it, the better. We would hope within a month or two, we may be able to show Kathleen the result of it all.
Well, let me ask you this. Who is the point person now on this? Is it you, Keith? And I guess it always has been. I want to make sure that we can rely on you to communicate whatever needs to be done and that type of thing. Because I really feel that it's the communications that faltered in this whole thing. And I just want to make sure, we want to make sure that we're up to date on everything that is happening here, because it's such a beautiful place, and but we'd like to stay involved, quite frankly.
Well, yes, I think, Mr. Chairman, I can say that, yeah, I'd definitely be involved, and as well as Bill in my office, in the more detailed aspects of the finalization of this. Before, we were really in a more of an observatory role, to just check on, make sure things weren't happening downstream or adversely affecting the wetlands. But with this component, we'll stay with Mr. Holson's concurrence, I think, on close track of what occurs. It'll probably happen fairly quickly. We'll be able to report on progress, tell Kathleen when it's starting, tell her when it's finished, and have the appropriate inspections. But yes, I expect to be very closely associated with this concluding portion of it.
Yes, we want, this is Todd, we want Keith and Bill involved till at least till the closure of the permit and everything's done and signed off on.
Good, thank you. So let's take a vote. I mean, there are 4 things that Kathleen said that we're going to decide. When is the pond, and are we going to is the commission going to do anything about changing the pond the way it is right now? The moving of, I'm looking at this, moving the dock from the west side to the east side, and I guess that's already been done, hasn't it? No. The installation of additional boulder edge stabilization along with pond embankments. So those are really the 3 things, or maybe there's a fourth thing that we're voting on. And does anyone have any negative feelings about any of those four?
No, but Dan, the dock is on the west side now. And I don't believe that they're asking to move it over to the east side. It was relocated to the west side, but I believe that's where it is intended to stay. Is that not correct?
That is correct, yes. Yeah, it was moved to the west side and we'd like to leave it there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay, man.
Any other comments?
Yeah, the only other thing, Dan, I'm sorry, I was going to suggest that what Kathy suggested, I think is appropriate, that in light of the history, but in light of the fact that everybody had given us good explanations and all that, that there be a continued oversight by Kathleen to make sure that the project is done to completion and consistent with the plans that we will approve, if we approve them.
Angela?
Yes, I was just going to say, I mean, it's happened, and obviously to put the pond back to where it was as per the modified permit would cause additional disturbance, and we had actually approved a much larger pond originally. I mean, the mitigation plantings, they all seem good, and the dock is where it is now. Doesn't seem as though that's caused problems, but it's a sad tale of lack of communication, and I think that's the lesson here from this particular episode, and that the oversight both by Keith Simpson and by Kathleen Holland are important elements.
All right, can we hear a motion? Anyone want to try a motion here?
Okay,
And
so I move approval of the application to allow the pond to remain as it currently stands, to go forward with the mitigation plantings, and for the dock to remain on the west side, subject to the special condition as outlined by Kathleen Holland of continued oversight by Keith Simpson throughout the project, and also by the Director of Inland Wetlands. Did I leave something out?
I don't
George?
think so.
Yeah.
I'll second. That was pretty
All
thorough.
those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand. No one's opposed. Okay. Angela, you're still,
No, I'm moving to, I'm voting to approve. Sorry.
okay, Moon. All right, the motion's carried. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms.
Yeah.
Wilson.
Good luck.
Thank you all.
All right, we'll continue the meeting now. Yeah, Kathleen, are you here? Yeah, there you are. Agent report. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 administrative action report on your report. Do you have any ones you want to comment on?
Seemed like they were a little while ago now. Let me just take a look here. So overall, activities are continuing here in New Canaan, especially with the real estate market being what it is right now. We are seeing a tremendous amount of new property owners coming to New Canaan, and everyone wishing to do something at their property that they are either purchasing or perhaps putting up for sale. So there's a lot of other applications in the hopper right now, and the contractors and consultants are a little behind on churning out the work. So these four actually made it to the finish line with all the reviews being completed by the various departments. Some of these have actually gone through for building permits if necessary, and one or two don't even require a building permit. It's more of a driveway realignment and some landscaping and drainage activities. So the winter was tough, so a lot of projects got put on hold with 12 to 18 inches of snow on the ground. The soil scientists are delayed in catching up to the activities that they need to do. So I think we're going to have sort of an ongoing of additional activities coming in over the spring, which is almost here, and summer, and straight into the fall.
But we have no new applications for April. Is that right?
Correct. Nothing for the commission. I probably have half a dozen additional administrative applications that I'm working on currently. I know that Keith Simpson has a large pond dredging project that he's getting ready to submit over on the Silver Mine Road area. So I believe he's shooting for perhaps an April filing to be received and then heard in May. But you know, he is working on a large project on the east side of town.
I actually had a question regarding the administrative actions. So the one detailed under paragraph 8, how close to the wetlands were the catch basins and the piping and stormwater detention system?
Angela, I'd have to go back and look at the plan, but they were, the driveway is being split up the hillside in order to orient the entrance into the house better for that particular location. They had no other, they have a way to get into the property, but it leads them to sort of the backside of the house. So these newish folks here they were working on that plan for over a year now, it feels like. Rob Frangione did the engineering for that. I could give you an exact number later, but I don't have it in front of me. They're not in the wetlands, they're in the driveway, and any of the drainage associated with it is outside of the wetlands.
Right.
On this one, there ended up being, to give you a little back history on this, they had to first obtain additional property from a neighboring property. So they did a planning and zoning action to adjust the lot line with our planning and zoning department and perhaps the commission, I can't remember. And then came through to get the review for to realign the driveway. They did discover on that little portion that they were purchasing from the neighbor, because I had them flag it for wetlands, because I suspected there was maybe some wetlands down that area. There was a small pocket of wetlands, but they're not going over it with the actual driveway installation.
So the activity isn't really that close to the wetlands. It's not in the upland review area.
No, I mean, my description is maybe too descriptive. Near isn't exact enough, but it certainly is in the upland review area. So I suppose I don't know if I wrote that or the applicant wrote that, but they're certainly qualified to obtain a wetland permit because of the activity and the relocation of the driveway and the wetlands in the area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Kathy,
Kathleen,
can I ask what a Coltech system is?
A Coltech system is a trade name for a stormwater management system.
Okay.
So Coltech is a big provider of these type of infiltrator systems that they are putting in for drainage and sometimes even a septic system.
Thank you.
I have a question, Kathleen, that actually was during the Holson discussion. And when Keith said that the call it the electric company wanted the not a conduit over the river, but to go under the river, did that happen? And how do you do that?
So what actually happened with that, and he didn't elaborate further on it, because I thought, oh my gosh, the commissioners are going to be going, what?
Well,
how did that happen?
Yeah.
It was during the drought. There was no water in the river, and the CLNP, whoever comes out to make a determination of how they want to get power from one side to the other, made the determination that they didn't want to strap to the timber frame bridge that was available. So Keith, once they discussed this with me, I said, I need a 8.5 by 11 plan. I want to have an understanding of how that activity is actually going to be installed. And they did provide all that information. So it was done in dry conditions. They put conduit. I have it in this big old folder here, but they put conduit. They were excavating anyway. That's where they were dredging for the pond. So they were literally had already dredged, and they would lay the pipes and then put the material back over the pipes. And CLP has certain standards as to the depth at which the pipe needs to be buried. And then after the pipes are in, they feed the wires from one side to the other. So it's inside of a conduit, which is buried under the ground, the new bed of the river, if you will, in the exact same area that they were dredging and they had dewatered and
Okay,
it was
well,
bone dry.
it
So
may,
I just wanted to make sure I had the record.
yeah. Well, it made me think of that scene in either Jaws 2 or Jaws 3 where the shark bites down on that big electric cable and blows up. So, very exciting.
Hopefully no sharks in this river.
And, I doubt that there are any, there could be a breeding
trout.
population of
There's trout
trout.
in there.
I don't know.
Kathleen, although we have no applications for April, we'll still hold a short meeting. Is that not correct? Yeah.
We will meet to receive any new applications that come in, and I'll report on any administrative actions that make it over the finish line before that meeting on April 12th. Our meeting is scheduled for April 12th, so it's the second Monday as opposed to the third Monday, so just double check your calendars on that. And I will send out the usual notices.
All right. Any other business? Anything else you want to talk about? No? Can I hear a motion to adjourn then?
I'll move to adjourn.
Colin? Who seconds?
Okay.
All right. All those in favor, raise your hand. Aye. We'll see you in April.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
all.
to see everybody.
Bye.
Have a good spring.